And we're back.
We are back.
Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome if you're joining us just for the first time today. This afternoon, 1 p.m. here on the Pacific Coast here in California. My name is Jason Levine here with Evan Abrams.
Hello.
Back on Adobe Live, behance.net/live. And so many cool things that we've been doing the last couple of days. A lot of great submissions.
Mm-hmm.
And today, of course, our theme is an extension of the sort of utopian idea where now it's settling on utopia.
That's
right. Kind of the theme we're working against today. I want to remind you, of course, you can see it right there on screen, that we've got a contest going on. We're going to be giving away some art prints as well as a year of Creative Cloud. So you need to be in the chat, be active, let us know where you are, where you're coming from. Give us a shout, say hey, hello, Laura, Tim, Mitch, Ray, Kendra, Joseph. Very nice to see you all. Hafid. All right. So I thought maybe before we get into it, just quickly to kind of inspire some people to keep working on stuff, because we've got 2 hours together, and we're going to cut off the submissions in approximately 90 minutes.
That's right.
So 2:30 Pacific, we're going to cut it off, and then we'll start kind of reviewing things for the big giveaway. But maybe we'll take a look at my screen real quickly for just some of this. This is not all of them. Some of them got moved, I think, and the links are not working anyway. But this is just some of the awesome things that we saw. So this happens to be Laura's, whom we just said hello to a moment ago. Nicely done.
So yeah, we're talking motion design. People are sending in their motion designs, and we are critiquing them and giving out fabulous prizes for people who do the good work.
That's
and
right.
It is an intense amount of labor to put together a motion graphics piece. Hopefully with some of the things we talk about.
Absolutely.
This will help you make them work faster, work smarter, get things going better, make your life more utopian.
Yes.
Here at your desk. So.
And want to emphasize again, if you've got questions for Evan and really any of the kind of, because you've really shown us an enormous amount of tips and little just sort of personal stylistic ways of doing things within layers, kind of keeping things super lean and clean.
Yeah.
Yesterday we touched more upon expressions, which is great because the day before we were expression-less.
That's right. Well.
Right. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. see what he just did there?
That's right. That's some visual humor.
That's what we're working with this show. So day one, it was kind of a nice segue because yesterday we got to see, but even still, in using the expressions, you're actually using one or two. I mean, it was basically the same expression over and over.
And when we talk about expressions, we're talking about a language that defines a relationship or a language that's describing what a thing does. So for some people, they're very intimidating. People are intimidated by expressions. Oh, it's coding, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, coding is just like talking, but you're talking to a very slow and very literal person who is your computer robot.
Right.
And it is sometimes difficult because expressions like it doesn't work and then I don't understand the error, blah, blah, blah. But if you break it down, take it one step at a time. When you make an error when trying to order in a restaurant in a country you're not from, the thing you end up with is an error message in the form of food you didn't order.
Right.
But in this case, After Effects tells you specifically what's up, and we can troubleshoot our expressions using the errors that it specifically gives you if you can kind of parse out what that means.
Right.
But it's all about becoming fluent. Oh, that was some mad kick flips.
Yeah,
that we're seeing, right? This is good. Oh, and a grind.
Ooh, nice.
That's good.
Wavy arms there too, inspired by some of what you were talking about yesterday,
Yeah.
I think. This was one that we actually didn't get to yesterday. This was Juan Camillo Ramirez. Submitted a little late yesterday, but that one looks fantastic.
Good.
And this one's real nice too.
There are also witches in Utopia here, as we can see. But yeah, we're cruising by. Got some parallax in the mountains there.
It's like she's on the Nimbus 5000 there.
More of a Nimbus 3000.
More of a Nimbus 3000 kind of guy? Okay.
Well, didn't go for the nav system.
That's right. Well, it is Utopia after all. You
right.
kind of get the full version there. Okay, so that's just a little bit of some of the great stuff that you all created yesterday. Again, our main theme today is settling on Utopia, and I think without further ado, let's see if we've got any. Hello, Olivier, Kilmont, Viduval, of course, Paul, Hamza, Dana, again, very nice to see you. Let's get into it, man.
Yeah.
Let's go make some stuff.
Let's kick it over to the Evan Abrams screen, and we'll have a look. Cool. So working off of the brief that we received earlier of Utopia, we ended up with this mosaic. So day one, we were talking about constructing a mosaic We have a little bit of a pinwheel going, so I'll continue to vamp.
That's right.
The working off of this large mosaic of images. Now, yesterday we went into some of the specific ones, and now today we're going to go further down into some of those. Oh no, what is happening with the pinwheel? This technical.
We didn't get a chance to restart before the stream. Maybe we should do a quick, unless you're feeling, do you feel lucky?
Maybe. I feel like we can't click on anything. This is the gripes.
Can't click on anything.
Oh,
Did you
maybe.
click one time or only twice?
I don't think I'm clicking it up.
Got myself and all this excitement.
Yeah, having a bit of technical woes.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
hopefully this wheel.
Even on Utopia.
Even on Utopia, we have problems.
Occasional. Yeah, it just happens.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm moraying here very nicely. That's unfortunate.
Great.
Yeah.
So how would we? If we needed to hard.
Yes.
Hard
so you
reset.
can't. Nothing's happening here, huh? No. Okay.
Machine busted. Taking a brief recess.
Yeah. All right. Here, let's go to the 2-shot, Chris, quickly, and we'll do a hard reset. Where is that?
Chris has been booted.
Oh, hey, Chris.
Take us to the 2-shot.
We're gonna take us to the 2-shot. We're gonna
Yeah.
restart this system here.
Okay. So while that goes on, though, let us get to some questions in the chat, because we are speaking also generally about how you organize files. We're talking about tips for how to sort of organize your life, how to work within an agency format, all that kind of thing. So if there are any sort of larger meta quandaries people have while we deal with restarting, then we can knock those out. But today we will also be delving into sort of a new feature, a new thing that's been opened up in 2018 is the ability to work with the path information, so that you're able to. Oh, there we go. Just move that away. Should be good to go right here. Oh, how much of my work is totally remote versus traveling and working with a team? These days, it's 100% remote, except when I'm brought in here. Because of the sort of amount of infrastructure and technology that I have laying around the office, it's more sort of effective for me to work from my pod where I'm in command of things. But thanks to video conferencing and all this stuff, we are able to collaborate in a team environment remotely, even if we're not in the same space. So, you just jump on Skype. You're like, hey, what's going on? It's 7 in the morning. Or, get them on FaceTime, get other people. Right. You can get people in real quick.
And get out quickly as well.
That's right.
That's the key, too. Right?
Or we're able to cloud share files. Right. So if you have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, you also have a whole bunch of storage that you can be sharing with other people who have the same stuff. So you're sharing files, you're signing them out, you're using them, you're putting it back in, it's working great, like we'll be looking at and collaborating on the same thing. So I would say the idea of remoteness and team format are not separate. You can be remote on and still be part of a team.
Right.
You can be in the same room and not work with others at all, right?
Right.
You could people could be siloed. Physical layout is not the same as structural organizational layout. Right. Yeah, it's good times.
Paul, yes. So day one, actually, we were talking about Evan. So he does use Overlord.
I do. I got a day one. First day it came out.
Right.
I ripped it open like Christmas, and it's really good. Because usually if you're working from Illustrator into After Effects, you're saving something or you're copy and pasting and you're moving it over. But to be able to pull it natively right in is really interesting and really fun. Yeah. The first time it came out, it already saved me like 8 hours.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, Bernard, by the way, shout out to Bernard Fields. What's up, dude? Was asking, how often do you do personal work to better yourself?
Well,
and we were just kind of talking about this on the couch.
Yeah,
a
we
moment
were.
ago. Yeah.
How at the end of a long project, I'm not interested in looking at a computer.
That's right. Now for more mead. No.
Pass.
Right.
Yeah.
Pass. Right. Anything but a screen at that point. Right?
Sometimes, but it's interesting. Like the stuff I do to really better myself is generally about sort of absorbing different kinds of media, like trying to kind of cross-train myself. That knowledge in one area will lead to different insight in another.
Right.
So a lot of the times I'm taking a break from doing things purely in After Effects to just going and drawing for a while.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna do something where I don't look at a computer. I'm gonna explore still lifes. I'm gonna get into some form. I'm gonna, increase my knowledge of how things move by maybe doing a little flipbook animation for myself. Right.
Nice.
Like these sort of.
So they're related. They're related.
Well, what's
ventures.
interesting is that just about everything will become related in your mind if you're working on it, right? I don't want to get too crazy about this, but
very tense right now.
But the idea is that some people like carve out an hour every day to do a little project to improve their skills. Some people carve out. They say, well, I'm going to dedicate one day a week to personal growth projects. Right. I don't know. For me, like I try to challenge and push myself on every client project that comes around to say, well, not only for myself, but for you, here are some directions we could go into. Okay. If it's sort of a budget project, we don't have a lot of time, we are not going to step outside the box.
No, of course
but
not.
It's important to sort of challenge yourself in those ways as often as you can.
Yeah.
So the idea of how often I am specifically carving out time to improve myself, it happens when it happens.
Yeah, it happens
and
when
I
it happens,
find like the breakthroughs I have when things like click and like now I see an old thing in a new way.
Right.
Those happen sporadically no matter what project I'm on, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing those like thing a day things, which by the way, huge commitment for people who are going to do those.
It's amazing. Right.
If you find if you've got the time, you've got the drive, give it a go, because that could be really transformative for people. But just like we were talking about yesterday, this idea of sort of finding yourself, finding your style, and then this idea of compartmentalizing and siloing. What's a personal improvement time? What's a sit down and do the work kind of time?
Right.
Like all the time is all the time, man.
Right.
Like there's either you're being highly conscious and cognizant of the choices you're making and how you're making those choices all the time, or maybe you're on autopilot sometimes. But you should always be working critically with stuff.
I like that. I think that's a good way to. That's kind of a good mantra for just that whole concept. Is work critically. You're probably experimenting, as you said, when you're taking on a new job. That's an opportunity to also expand a bit
some
for
things
the client.
Some things are certainly fairly rote, and you'll sort of know in your gut, like we have 20 hours to accomplish this gig. I may not be taking flights of fancy during this particular project, but when you're tight on time, that's an opportunity to critically think about your workflow. Where can you shave seconds in the corners, right? If you think about a project, even a project that seems very rote, imagine you watch NASCAR, the more interesting like Le Mans or the auto racing.
Yes.
The difference is in fractions of a second, or it's in shaving and refining.
Right.
And just about anything that is process oriented is about shaving, refining. Sometimes it's about shifting and paradigm shifting, right? But it's little changes that are going to make things easier for yourself, right? The way you frame ideas, the way you think about projects. Sometimes you'll have a big breakthrough and everything will change, but sometimes it's incremental change. So you don't need to. Some people put a lot of pressure on themselves to think, oh, I'm not having a breakthrough into this. Oh, last month I was this way. Why am I not so much better this month? It's just like working out. It's just like anything else. You look back at your work a year ago and you'll say, whoa, who made this? That's not me because I'm here now.
That's right.
But you don't notice it because it's
you're
incremental and small every day.
Absolutely.
So, I wouldn't take too much pressure on yourself in that way.
And yes, Masiak Diego just answered you, but that is it's just a custom grid on top of the layout.
Yeah, so to go back into how we organized this piece, which kind of plays into what else we'll be doing and working with here in a moment. All of these things were arranged on a grid. So day one, we sort of made these shapes kind of come together in this way, and now we're going to be populating them. And I worked with this very uniform grid so that not only are the elements on the grid, but also things within them kind of line up on the grid to have some harmony in the piece and have that thing kind of be very, very nice and together. So today, yesterday we looked at, if you want to go back and look at that later, we talked about this beach scene and the glass deformations there. We've talked about this floating bubble, a little bit of the character animation in there. So that was bubble travel here. We talked about parallax and parenting things.
Gradients, use of gradients.
Exactly, and how we can cheat those things. Today, I think we will be looking at this scene up in the corner where we've got a whole bunch of plants and a fun kind of gate here, and we are going, if we are to settle Utopia, how will we get around, right? And when I think about what is utopic, we go back to the brief, as we've said many times. When you're stuck for ideas on a project, go back to the brief and mine the creators, the people who have the concept in their mind, mine that document for what it can tell you. And in this case, we're thinking about Utopia, we're thinking about settling it. Some people want to settle at the beach because they like that sea air.
Right.
Some people want to settle inland on the middle of one of these beautiful continents. Right. How do we get between them? Because as someone who spent a couple weeks in Costa Rica recently, the only problem is you have to drive from one to the other. Not in Utopia, you know. And in fact, in a utopian setting, if we have this technology, you can just install this in your home, right?
Right, of course.
Like, well, where do I live? Well, I live here, and to take a vacation, my backyard is the beach. I just walk out.
Right. Your world is a green screen composited with real 4D things.
That's right. Yeah, it's fourth dimension time, right?
Right. Yeah. It's or that, or what they do at Disney, where you just get squirted in the face with water.
Right. Smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision,
That
exactly.
could be
That's right.
be a fourth dimension.
That's right.
Really, the fourth dimension is whatever you feel it is.
Right.
So,
That's right.
But yeah, so
Cool. Okay.
in this shot, let's get a little deeper into what it is. What are we going to make? How do we accomplish what we're seeing? If we take it back to brass tacks, take it to the earliest form, take it to the basic conception of this idea. We are in a scene, and through a part of that scene, the middle, we will see a different thing, right? So, and what we want is to be able to have things like these plants moving, or the moon or the sun back there doing stuff. We want to be able to see that through the gateway. So when we're setting that up, we would think to ourselves, well, we would think that perhaps there should be a composition, and then within that, we know we can reveal things using track mats with masks. We'll reveal it somehow.
Okay.
And to go between them, the technique I'm using here is what we call a match cut. So these are two compositions. This is place A, which we've called a jungle. And the jungle place, we're just moving from one side of the portal to the other side of the portal. That's it. And it's moving at a certain speed, and we are moving from one side of the portal to the other. Now, if we go back, hitting tab and go back, the next scene that we end up at is place B, beach. And this has the exact same kind of motion going on in it, but it's not even the reverse. It's the exact same.
Right, it's the same. Right.
And we're just cutting on the middle part, right? So
the turn of the door, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the cut would take place sort of right here, and then we cut between the two of them. Oh, thank you. So that is the gist of what's happening. Now, in order to cover up the time in which one scene becomes the other scene, what we want to do is cover it up with a bunch of things. And this is just a bunch of plants that look like they could belong in either space. Because this scene over here, on this one side, is green and blue.
Right.
On this side, red and blue.
Right.
So we're using the common element of blue to cover both.
Right. And just looking at this too, I'm guessing probably originally designed with the grid there. I mean, you've got everything so perfectly aligned and
so
nice symmetry and things going on there.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about where is the gate, how does the gate fit into all this stuff, we have a look at the proportion grid. So on this one, I don't think I was using this size of grid.
Yeah,
I think I was using it in fifths maybe, just to end up with having this stuck in the middle of a nice size, populating around with all of these plants. So the main thing that's going on in here is this gate, that the gate is moving or changing, and the movement of all the plants around it tell us that the camera is what's pivoting, or the universe is spinning. It could be one of those, but we'll imagine that it's a camera.
It's a camera, that's right.
Yeah. So, stripping away all of the plants and all of the things, what we have is in the middle this fairly normal-looking gate, right? So if we look at just the gate...
looks like I could have drawn that almost.
That's true.
Almost.
You could draw.
I appreciate that.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thank you.
And so can you, everyone.
And so can you. That's right, yeah.
So if we just play back what this thing does, it's really just repeating the same movement. Borp, borp. So it's just closing, opening, right? So there's not too much to it, but we take this thing as a composition, and we've used it. You can see by this fun little flowchart, we've used gateway in all of these different places. And it's the same gateway, so it has the exact same timing. But the point at which the gate comes together, we're just flipping it.
Right.
So we're going to seem like we're going from one side to the other side. If we just solo this, it seems like we're flipping from one side to the other. Seamless, wonderful, but we're just flipping it.
That's right.
At the time. That's the sleight of hand magic
That's right.
trick.
Absolutely right.
And it's
fooling the eye there. Yeah.
So thanks to technology, we can just do that. So
Got it right on that frame.
So we should probably talk through making such a thing. This is the same sort of technique you would use if you're doing a doorway, if you're doing a window, if you're doing any kind of hole that goes through stuff. And you could, if you want, make such a thing using the Cinema 4D extrude, right?
Right, sure.
We could just make a rectangle and extrude. So if we were problem solving this thing, take it back to the beginning. Say, we want a gate that goes from the jungle to the beach. Designer, make happen, right, is what we'd end up with. And then you have to start going through the process of choosing which techniques you're going to use to accomplish that.
Right.
So when we look into our massive garage of tools that is After Effects, we say, which tools will we grab from the shelf? Will we grab the 3D thing? Well, we could go through that, right? And it would be just as simple as, we're going to call this the example gate. So we could go ahead and we could have the example gate, and then we get it going by making a rectangle, and we make a rectangle of a certain size, whatever size we like. Just a note while I'm working with shape layers, I almost always make them in the same way. There are some people who go like this, and then they go like this, and then they center it, or they center the anchor point, da-da-da-da. That's not how Evan gets down. Evan, I always go double click up here, and then
I noticed that too.
go like this, which is it's a little bit weird, but I'll tell you why I do it.
I'm curious.
So-
because I do it exactly the way you showed afterwards. I first select it, drag it. It's always some weird size, and then recenter the anchor point. It's like 5 steps.
Yeah.
It seems to take a long time.
But you could be using a script that would be automating that. You could.
Yes.
That's allowing you to work the same way you always work, but with this change. So what the script might do is take your anchor point, stick it in the middle, and then you take this and stick that in the middle. So visually, these things are pretty much the same, right? So let's say both of them have the rectangle path of the same size. Same, right? Well, I'm just going to hit U real quick. When you hit U twice, that's Uber frame, and it tells you everything that's been changed about it. Here's yours. Let's say this is the same numbers, but transform rectangle has a position of blah, blah, blah. Transform anchor point has a translation of blah, blah, blah. Mine doesn't have those because when you double click, it just puts it in the middle. This gets to be confusing when you start doing things like repeaters or like moving things around. One of the number one questions I get, specifically on the subject of repeaters, is when I do the repeater, it doesn't work the way I think it should work. It doesn't work the way you think it should work because there's information that you're not accounting for. So it's things like the actual location of paths. Because this gets even more complicated if instead of a rectangle path whose transform of the rectangle group is somewhere wacky, if it's just a path, Like I'm going to draw this shape. I want it to be this size, and now I'm going to stick the anchor point in the middle and all that stuff.
Right.
There's even less information to draw on when you hit Uber frame to fix that up. It's confusing because you expect one thing and it does the other.
Right.
To avoid myself being confused, I just do it this way. And there are certainly no end of things to correct this way.
Right.
But because I spend time warping myself to fit the tool rather than,
Yelling at the tool to work the way you want it to.
I don't buy a new set of golf clubs. I go to the range and I hit some balls.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
So that's my ethos for this kind of thing. So we've got a rectangle, right? Then we could duplicate this rectangle path, which will give us a second one. We'll make it a little bit smaller because we're making a gate. Gates need holes in them. And if it's going to be a hole, then we add a merge paths, and the merge paths should be subtracting. So we've got this kind of a thing. In our example, we had a gradient that went from the top to the bottom. So we'll just make a little gradient action. So we've got over there, and then over here. And we're working with black and white gradients in this example for a couple of reasons.
And this is what you talked about yesterday too.
Yeah,
as opposed to committing here in the pre-comp to the colors.
Exactly, yeah.
Deeply embedded in many layers. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I don't want to do this in this scene.
Right.
Because this is solving a problem that I feel I will have.
Right.
I want to use the same gate in two lighting environments.
Right.
The jungle, which will be green and blue.
Right.
The beach, which will be red and blue.
Doesn't make sense to color it here. You'd have to change it in that. Right.
Exactly. So I know I can use the tint later
Right.
to fix this up.
Awesome.
And you can apply all sorts of other effects, but we're starting with a basic thing that is very basic for us. So when we're looking at our gate, now we can use that decision to say, well, are we going to make this three-dimensional using some trickery? Are we going to make this three-dimensional using actual three-dimensional stuff?
Right.
So if we were to do it totally three-dimensional, we would hit the 3D button, and we're already in the Cinema 4D renderer.
Right, which is the new default.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Yes.
The difference is there's a few big time differences going on. And you should kind of pay attention to what is enabled, what is disabled.
Right.
Because this is telling us what kinds of decisions, what kind of tools you get to use with it.
Right, in conjunction with.
Yeah, so things that we cannot use in here are masks and effects on, continuously rasterized layers, text and shape layers. Oop, that's one of us, that's shape layer. So it's going to limit how we use this shape layer.
Right.
It's also going to deal with, you'll notice that the gradient is gone. So that gradient is not around. We'd have to put it back a different way.
Right.
So it's a bit of a limitation. However, you could put a light, and then you've got real lighting scenario.
Exactly.
We've got that going on.
And that's the thing, and that's kind of what you were describing before, is it's the thought process behind, okay, if I choose now the Cinema 4D renderer, because now we're in actual 3D, and because it allows for extrusion and these other things, right, now you have to make that gradient with lights and recreate that scene, which is great, but again, with some other limitations as well. Yeah.
But it's not that one is better than the other.
Right.
Because we heard yesterday a lot of people saying, well, why aren't we accomplishing this in Cinema 4D?
Right.
Why aren't we doing X in this? For us, we're making a conscious choice that we know this will make our lives a little bit more difficult for the style that we want to achieve. The style we've been working with here is sort of a thick line and gradient style. So losing access to gradients is kind of a kick in the knickers, right? And
That's what I would have said.
everyone says this. This is a phrase people say all the time.
Kick in the knickers. Hashtag kick in the knickers.
So we know that might not be a good move, but you might bull ahead. People might bull ahead with this idea. And if they do, then they would be able to very quickly just extrude this out into space, and then they would want to orbit a camera around it.
Right.
If we're extruding it by 100 and you want kind of the anchor point to be in the center, you need to adjust the anchor point to fit, going not that way, but... So we need to adjust the anchor point to sort of be in the middle. So it's got to go like that. So now the anchor point is right in the center, meaning this thing is locked in the middle of our universe, perfectly in the middle. We could make a new null object. Awesome. We could make a new camera. And because we've sort of decided to use an Unreal kind of flat style thing, then whatever camera we choose is going to impart perspective on things. Even if we jack this up to the highest number possible, because at this time we don't have access to a true parallel camera. In Cinema 4D, you do have access to a true parallel camera. But again, crack open Cinema 4D Lite, you can enjoy that as you please.
Which you can do directly from After Effects under File New Cinema 4D Project.
Exactly. So, if we go back to our active camera view, and we do something like we just orbit the camera around this thing, that's what we're doing the orbit. So if you want to use that methodology, that's perfectly good. That's a wonderful methodology to use.
But still now you'd have to go into adding the lighting now to create the gradients and the shadows and all the other.
It may not be more labor, it's different labor, it's setting up a different set of ideas. And different challenges to solve, such as not having access to a parallel camera, even though these sides are pretty close to each other. It's not flat across the top. So if I were to put just a straight line as my ground down here, not as clean. And because Utopia is clean and mathematical and all that stuff, it is utopic, an unreal place. We want to maintain that idea of unreality. So very quickly we can say, all right, let's shift gears. Let's do it flatly. Like Michael Flatley.
You beat me to it. Couldn't get it out fast enough.
No, Michael Flatley.
Evan for 100 points.
Jump into it with Michael Flatley.
Did you see how the words were jumbled? They couldn't get it out.
Gotta jump on that.
That's almost like a different sound, like the sheep there.
Yeah. Please feel free to insert our rambling voices.
A lot of internal jokes going on.
Yeah. So you could switch it to the classic 3D mode if you want to have the gradients in there, and you could build a little gate out of little layers, like a little thing made of papercraft. Totally do that as well. I like to work two-dimensionally. I like to make things unreal, kind of cartoonish, and I like things to be kind of weird in in the way they interact, not being totally real, kind of a facsimile of reality. That brings me joy to do that.
Some like optical illusion stuff,
That's I'm a big Escher fan. I got Escher drawings on the wall in my office, so it's that's when I was young. I was like, that's what real drawing is.
That's right.
That's how the real drawing.
If only I could have a staircase like that in my house.
Well, then you'd be.
I'd still be walking those stairs.
Yeah,
is what I'd be doing.
Well, you'd also be Jareth the Goblin King.
That is true. Well, not too far from that on some days.
It depends on the pants.
It depends on the pants. And yes, Paul, animate is based on the old Flash. Yes. Interjecting.
Yeah. So, and a lot of the techniques we use here can also be done in animate. I prefer to use After Effects only because I'm way more confident with it. I mean, the first program I ever animated in was Flash, so it's very similar. But I find animate is great when you're doing characters, when you might be doing a lot of frame-by-frame stuff, when you need access to the onion skinning, or you're creating something that is going to be sort of dynamic. You need an HTML5 kind of output, right? So depending on where you're going, this is going to be used in a video context, so let's make use of the video powers in here. It's not to say you couldn't do a hybrid approach.
Right, of course.
To make elements in Animate, bring them into After Effects. A wonderful way to go. If you have access to all the apps in the Creative Cloud,
why not?
Jump all over the
jump
place,
all over,
right?
And it make it possible to do that.
Exactly, and it's a wonderful way to be. So let's make this thing the gateway of our dreams to our dreams, and get it into the style we want, and that kind of thing. So we do want to stroke around it, and what I want to do is have the gate like close. I want the gate to close itself up. And I'm going to do that just by altering the scale and the position of the group. Now, it's really, really important that I say that because there are two scales you might change. The scale I want to do is the scale of the group. And what I want it to do, we're going to start by unlinking them. We're going to have it start at 50% like this, and in the future time it will go to 0, so it'll be a total flat line. and because that is now a wall rather than a door in front of us. My mom always said I would make a better wall than a door. So that's not true. My mom is a saint. She would never say that to a child. But you can see we're squishing this thing as it turns into a line. If it's part of a rectangular prism of some kind, then its position should also change. So it would bump out. Let's say it bumps out like 50 pixels like that. So the movement is kind of going around, right? So 2 things that I'm currently unhappy with what I'm looking at. I don't like that the stroke is scaling. That is not in keeping with my style. So what you can do inside the contents of this layer, inside the group we have called rectangle 1, take the stroke, put it outside. Oh no, now there's no
now
stroke.
It's not scaling. Oh, nice.
Boop. And now it is outside. It's happening because of the hierarchy of layers, and this is one of the hardest things to sort of, when we talked about making breakthroughs before.
To grasp this in its entirety.
To grasp everything that's happening inside this space. In the hierarchy, this is happening, and then this is happening, which can be tough because, well, that's not. Do things happen from the top down or from the bottom up? Which is the topmost flavor that I'm getting into. So it's by pulling the stroke outside of the group, then the stroke is applied and not deformed by everything that's going on inside. Now, there's also the gradient. Because the gradient is happening before it's above, you can see the gradient is over top of that stroke, which we might not want. So we can do the exact same thing. We can just pull it out, and now it's just like that. And with this stroke, we want some round caps. We'd have some round joints, so we can make that happen. So these are getting a little bit rounder in the corners. And
these are just like stylistic choices, right? You can, again, kind of it's the flavor that you were talking about this yesterday, having those the round butt caps.
That if that's going to be, if that's the way it is in some of these, in some of the mosaic that we're making, in some of the project, whether it's 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute animation, if you have decided early on, it's round butt caps, it's round joints. Lock it in.
Keep it consistent.
Keep it consistent. Keep it clean, guys. So, but conversely, if the style is to be different and ragged, and we're it's a hodgepodge of styles, you could mix butt caps and round caps and projecting caps. You could mix those in a project. I'm not saying don't mix them.
Are you saying don't mix them?
I'm saying if they don't have any meaning or purpose, then you should try to unify and harmonize.
I think this is a really good sort of, again, it's a best practice design concept, right? I mean, there's an opportunity sometimes maybe to mix and match.
Right, because what you might have, let's say, for example, we were presenting the world of Utopia in contrast to the world of Earth, right? Okay. Then we could say, well, when you see this visual style, we're talking about Earth. When you see this visual style, we're talking about Utopia. So you can contrast. This goes back to the old-time principles of design, line, shape, color, using them to convey meaning, to convey delineation of categories or whatever. You can use visual style. You're making choices to say, this is what Utopia is defined as, this is what not Utopia is defined as, not with our voiceover, but with our visual.
That's right.
So you could, if you couldn't even hear the voiceover of a piece, you should be able to tell, oh, this is the old time, this is the new time. And some people do it like, you see this in film where a flashback is in sepia tone. Sepia tone? Sepia tone.
There we go again. That's right.
All right.
Yes.
Spin pronunciation.
I say sepia, you say sepia. Sepia.
Let's call the whole thing.
Let's leave.
Let's call the whole thing up. That being said, who does say? I guess British people say tomato. Do they? So if we've got the gate here, we've got it in the style we want. It's doing this thing where it closes and then opens. It's not doing it in a way we would like. We'll say that much. It's doing it in this linear, unpleasing fashion. So we need to ease these, go into our old friend, the old graph editor, and
The birthday cake bar coming back.
That's right. The folks at home don't know this, but Jason got me a wonderful gift, a birthday cake protein bar.
That's right.
My favorite kind. It's marginally healthy for me. So
very low sugar, very high protein and fiber.
Yeah, right, yes. Exactly. Well, it tells me you're thinking about my birthday and also my dietary needs.
And also your dietary needs.
So it's the most thoughtful of birthday cakes.
It's coming back to remind you.
Oh, I get to enjoy it twice.
That's right, yeah.
So what I'm going to do is pull the influence handles. I'm just going to zoom in on the graph here so that we can see what is going on. When we look at the graph editor, I'm pulling the influence handle so that it's accelerating at that point, at the middle point.
Right.
Now I'm doing that because I know that in the future time, the future Evan will be happy with that because that is the part that we're going to cover up.
That's right.
And we're covering up this part with a bunch of garbage, but we want to linger the least on this particular frame. Right. In fact, we might even edit that frame out using time remapping later.
Right.
We might say, the time when we're looking totally parallel onto something is not visually pleasing.
Right.
And it would be conceptually difficult to think about, like, is the sky half red and half green at that point? No, it's instantaneous. So we're trying to accelerate that move so that we could really cut from, we might even cut from like this frame to this frame, right? But for lining everything up, for harmonizing all of the motion, it's easiest for us to just say, this handle's at 100%, this handle's at 100%, this handle is could be at 0%, but let's just leave it at default so we don't have to do too much work. So that's something that we're able to do. Now we've got one part of a gate, something that we can do that's fun inside rectangle paths is we can round them out. So we can say, well, let's add a little roundness to the inside of the gate. So it's more, I'm thinking Star Trek the original series style here. Is it City on the Edge of Tomorrow? Someone let me know if it's not City on the Edge of Tomorrow, the episode with a large gate that leads to a cowboy planet or something. And I'm going to line this up so that it starts at 1 second, ends at 3 seconds, because I like to time remap my compositions later. Right. And by setting these things up inside comps, and then sometimes even putting...
I was going to say, do you put markers and notes for yourself in there? Yeah,
I do. Okay. So if this were like a complex series of things, like the gate is going to do this action, or the character is going to... This is walk cycle, this is throw a ball, this is catch a thing, then you would set up little markers in here, and then you can go in here and you can say, gate open. You can just type that in, and then at here you could set a marker and you could say gate closed. Closed. As long as you can read it, that's fine.
Right. Spelling is not necessary.
No, I don't think. I think that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
That's right.
Look, I'm a visual person, not a spelling.
Right. And I'll emphasize again, because you're making me want to go back and forth. I was going back and forth with the graph editor day one. Now you're making me want to live in there, because that subtle change plus the easing. Mm-hmm. Once again, you've made this gateway door just feel, there's just something so pleasing about it, and real, and not linear.
Yep.
And just faux real.
Yeah, that's right.
Not faux real, but faux.
It's faux real.
All right, not that. FAUX real. That's
right.
There's just something really, really awesome about it.
Yeah. So what else we need? We have gate front. We also need sort of the other side of the gate, which would be nice to have. So it'll probably be, instead of gate front, it would be the gate back. That would be a good spot for the gate. And rather than, it would have the exact same positional change, same scale change rather, but a totally different positional change. So it would go over there. And so the back gate would be under, so that we would have these sort of two sides. Mm-hmm. Now, what's ultimately going to end up happening with this is this will probably be covered up by the walls of the gate, right? But what this is providing us in this moment is it's providing us this back curve line here, the back of the gate that you would see. So its fill is going to be hot pink, fuchsia, no, just totally black, that's fine. So it could be like that. And it's got all the properties because we just duplicated it. But as you can see, we are bouncing back and forth like so. The next thing we need is sort of the walls of this thing, right? And if you're gonna fake something in 3 dimensions, fake it all the way. So we're gonna
really commit to faking it all the way.
That's right. You gotta commit to the lie.
That's right. Now, how long did it? Let me ask you this, because we were kind of talking about this on day one. Because you didn't really study this type of stuff specifically, right? In terms of just shadowing and building, sort of simulation of 3D, or should I say simplification of
That's right.
of 2.5D.
The simplification.
Right, but how did you sort of learn to really make it look right, believable, correct, the way that it should appear? You know.
So honestly, a lot of it comes from observation. Like I was always drawing as a kid and stuff like that. But I was always a horrible drawer as a kid. I'll be honest. Like, the most frustrating thing in the world is trying to make something look correct.
Right.
And
where light is concerned, right? Or
we're talking lighting. We're talking about shape and perspective.
Right.
For me, a lot of it was drawing still lifes and that kind of thing, observing our observable reality around us and trying to replicate that drawing, which is really what you'd end up doing at your first year design college, right? You're going to be exposed to creating things that are real, creating things that are abstract. So, but really my formal education is in the realm of marketing.
Right.
So rather than learning color theory, that is things like, well, these are color harmonies.
Right.
Here's a color wheel. We can put things together in this way. I instead learned color psychology, the manipulation of humans through what colors we show them. Because you can make people hungry by showing them green, yellow, and red. If you ever wonder why so many restaurants are full of those colors, specifically Subway uses them to great effect. Apparently, subjects feel hungry when you're exposed to those colors. But this idea of being culturally sensitive to color and all that stuff. Now, have those things helped me make more compelling design? Maybe. Have they helped me solve clients' problems a lot easier? Definitely. Because when we're in a meeting and we're talking about, well, as a client, we don't know what colors to use. Like, well, here's some options you can think about. We know X, Y, Z about your brand.
Right.
I know X, Y, Z about what colors will fit with what you're doing.
Right.
Or if you're getting in really early and they haven't even made these kinds of choices. A lot of you out there are probably coming across from print design and stuff like that, so you're making logos and brand identities.
Right.
These are questions that you need to have to suss out from the client.
Right.
What do you want to say? What are we going to say visually about you with this stuff? So yeah, that's where a lot of it comes from.
Okay.
A lot of it also comes from being really naturally curious. I love to understand. I want to know. It's not enough for me to know how something works. I need to know why it would work that way.
That was my tweet yesterday. Learn the how and the why.
Yeah, because
that's you. I can see that. I know it. Yes, absolutely.
Even if we're baking. For cooking, baking more than cooking. But if you're...
It's a social comment right there.
Well, it's that baking is more science than it is art,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to bake something, you follow a recipe, set timings, and that kind of thing. When you look out there at what instruction there is for a lot of things on After Effects, on motion design, a lot of instruction is hyper-specific.
Right.
And hyper-specific in a way that if you do X, Y, Z, then you'll end up with this result. The result is nice, and we kind of reached like a social peak of this as someone who sometimes receives people's reels for freelancing work and stuff like that, or subcontracting. I started to see an intense pattern of people who were showing me in their reel the output of tutorials. And I look at the person's reel and I'm like, so did you watch a tutorial on YouTube to make any of that? Oh no, it's all mine. Oh really? Because I made one of those.
Yeah, right.
I see the output of something that we've literally talked about ad nauseum.
Yes.
And while it may be spontaneous generation, the idea that two people can have the same idea at the same time. However, when 10 people submit a reel with the same thing in it, not good.
Not good.
And the trouble is that people aren't going super deep to interpret these ideas as their own. So it's wonderful to show technical competency. it's not great if you're not showing application of competency.
Right.
So it's not enough that you follow a recipe and create a cookie. I need to know that you can create a cookie you've never thought of before,
Right.
which is very different. So a lot of people, like, they do characters the same way all the time. Always noodle arm, always this.
Right.
When I see that, I think we could collaborate on a specific project because I need you to do this specific look.
Right.
I don't know if you could flex to do these, to solve these other problems in other ways.
Right.
If I came to you with a more nebulous idea to say, I need this problem solved, I don't have time to solve it myself, can you solve this? Not so much. So, rather than I can do specific things, showing a breadth and diversity of technique and application is really useful. I would recommend. So that's anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We got on a tangent.
And now we're okay. Oh, and we're 10 minutes away from our random giveaway. So again, keep yourselves. I know actually they're mesmerized. The chat's a little quiet right now because I think people are. I love the why about these things too, and many know here have watched me and our colleagues on here and on previously on Twitch and stuff. I love getting into the why and the reasons behind it all because, right, I too am curious.
Yeah,
about those same reasons.
And I don't think anyone gets into design without being curious. Really, like from the earliest time of wanting to take something that's in here and put it out here. I think everyone has had that same frustration that is, in here it's perfect, out here it's imperfect.
Right.
How do I close that gap?
Right.
And then you go on an adventure, a journey of discovery, self-discovery and other.
Oh yeah, and Voodoo Val confirms. Yep, all just taking in all the advice. It's nice to just sit and listen. Love that. Awesome. All right. Oh yes, and as Tim has just reminded you, 39 minutes to submit your contest entries. So get on that.
Yeah, and I mean, if I could talk about the lovely prize that awaits you for doing that, like that's a great prize. You should get in on that. If you've been holding back for the last couple days, now's the time to shine.
That's right.
You want to jump in there. So what I'm doing now, and what I've done when we were chatting, is just offsetting the gate parts here at the beginning. So it's like we're looking at kind of a 3/4 view, so that we're bouncing back and forth between that kind of 3/4 look that we've got going on. So that we are going from the 3/4 view to the profile view and then back to the 3/4 view. So it all kind of works out. So now we need a wall that kind of follows along with that kind of a motion. So its position is going to change, its size is going to change. So the position, and also I created a null and stuck it in the middle.
Okay.
You don't have to do that. I like to do it because it makes all the numbers kind of round. So the position here is now 0, 0 because it's right in the middle.
Okay.
And because I know relatively to what it's doing, its delta of movement is going to take it. It's going to take it out here to this side. So that is a good spot for it to go. And then of course it is returning. It's just returning to where it goes. We could even, on all of these, we could be using an expression. Of course, we're using the expression, the loop out expression to ping pong between these, if we so desired. However, I am kind of leaving a bit of flexibility open on this one in case we come back and we say that we would like it to be just to change the motion of these a little bit. But while we're talking about motion again, we're looking back at this graph and we're making sure that all of the handles are creating the same kind of mountainous thing. And because these things are the same, we're ending up with this kind of look, right? So it is moving, it is happening, it's doing exactly as we like, it's lining up because we've used simple numbers that 100% influence handle here, 100% there, default middle. So that's getting us where we want to go. So we could call this like front wall.
You're very good at naming your shape layers.
Thank
too.
you.
You really are. That has not gone unnoticed.
Oh, not only do I name them, but I color them.
Oh yeah, I know that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you really want to make a habit out of, is naming convention, and sort of understanding that you might come back to this in the future, and it won't make any sense to you because you didn't have it in your headspace in this moment, right? And that is not great when you have to spend an hour combing through layers and everything's super weird, and it's hard if you, like, let's say we're working for an agency, right? If I'm a freelancer for an agency, they need to back up and record all of the stuff for continuity of service with a client. I'm going to be turning my files over to somebody else. And there are some designers who do not turn over their files. There are some who do. There are some who charge a premium for it, which I would recommend is the move, right? Like, unless you want to be very secretive about your
technique,
about your wizardry. You know, if you can't let the spells out of the castle, then you definitely hoard them. But I'll be honest with you, you put a percentage premium on that. Just ask yourself, how much is it worth to put this out there, right? And there is a fear. Some people have this fear that, well, if I give it up, then they might not
hire you.
Might not hire me again. Yeah, they'll take my special sauce. Then they'll be making the delicious enchiladas without me. I'll be left behind. I'll tell you, that's actually never happened to me.
Okay. I was going to say, and has that happened? I mean, you would assume it could.
It could.
But then they still need to find someone who can animate and then dissect what you did anyway and do it in your style. And
well, I don't think it's happened to me because I'm brought in often to solve problems. Like, we have this thing we can't accomplish ourselves, Evan. I'm like, all right, gentlemen, here's the problem. And then I get in there and I make that happen. And then, of course, I'm like, here's this stuff. Figure it out, I'm out, and then move on. They have another crisis, I'm back in. So that's because my function is to solve problem. It's not, we need this thing ground out. Where's a grinder? Here you go. I'll also say that for any of the business I may have lost out with this ethos, I have not noticed it. Because when people don't call, you don't hear from them. So you don't know when people are not calling. So maybe that's a bad business move on my hand. However, just because of the way I operate, the way I structure my life, I've actually never noticed that. Because there's always something new, always someone new coming around.
And I like the idea that if you are going to do it and you're willing to sort of give up your project and your special sauce, charge a premium for it.
Well, the other thing is that sometimes it's also, are you willing to tag 5 hours onto this project to explain it to some of our staff, right? Because sometimes what we're making are like show graphic packages, and so it's like, we have to use this for the next 2 years. Can you create a document so someone else can use this?
Can modify the one line of text that will change over the next 2 years,
And so when you've been talking about like the templates and being able to make your own templates, that's amazing, because it's something that a designer can design something that is now not only beautiful but usable,
and reusable,
so that you can make something once, kick it over to a team of people who are sort of further back in their journey. The other thing is, we've talked about the agency format and what it's like to live and work in such a structure, and the idea that if you're going to work somewhere, your career is going to be moving forward. You're not going to be keyframing stuff all your life. Eventually, you will be making decisions for someone else who'll be doing this hard work, So hopefully, I don't think a lot of people envision doing this kind of thing when they're 40, when they're 50, They're going to be showing up wearing a sweater vest and telling people how to do stuff. That's going to be their kind of move. You're going to go from being the guy this bobblehead is talking to the bobblehead guy. Oh, he's not a bobblehead.
But he kind of bobbles.
There we go. So, that's the general trajectory for folks. But at the same time, you got to be kind of cognizant that we are moving towards the idea of things being more shared, and that's just part of how things go. And it's not super bad, because there are folks. For example, I've worked for some agencies that are not even video agencies. They are print, and they have a client who's like, we would also like a GIF. And so we deliver this branded GIF experience, and the staff there who've never opened After Effects may have to open and modify those files, They might, maybe it would be nice if they called me for that thing that I'd bill an hour for, right?
Right.
That sounds a little annoying, though, right?
Right.
How about this? I'll bill you a couple hours now.
Right. Up front.
And
right.
now you will not have to call me for
Right.
this specific thing in a year.
Yeah, and that's just great time management too, because you're right. And again, out of context, a year later, can we go back into that GIF project? And you just remind me how to.
I guess
already?
so.
Yeah.
And it's really like it sort of helps to build a relationship with people.
Right.
So I'll say that a lot of my work is repeat work. Like
Right.
it's with the same people who I have a rapport with, and we work really well together and that kind of thing. And they love it because we share and we learn and we grow together.
Right.
So it's interesting that the time I've been with a bunch of these groups, it's that as I've worked with them, they have increased the complexity, and their ask doesn't stay the same. We're not creating the same work. Over the last 5 years, we've won awards together, that kind of thing, and their work is going up, so they're getting different clients and different challenges all the time. So it's not like, oh, we have the recipe, now we don't need you. It's we need more recipes.
That's right, more recipes.
We're getting the Michelin stars. We gotta get
right.
more in the kitchen.
That's right.
A lot of food metaphor today.
Yeah, a lot of that today. All right, so as you're going to keep doing that, I think it's time for our special impromptu giveaway. So give us some hype in the chat. Hype in the chat.
Yeah,
Random giveaway.
Tell us who you are. You're gonna win some prints. Is that
That's
right?
right, we're going to win some. Not dearly beloved prints, but art prints.
No, I was a big Prince fan. I
yeah.
am still a Prince fan.
Oh, yeah. I recently acquired a bunch of new old vinyl of his. And,
Like remastering of his work.
well, there were some that were later, they were issued right after he died, but I
Yeah.
don't know that they were actually redone in any way,
Okay.
just repressed perhaps on vinyl. And then some originals, like his first two albums on like original late 70s super thin vinyl. There was that crisis at the time. And wow, so good. So good to hear that stuff in its original format too. It's a whole bunch of releases because of his, the whole record company thing in the mid-90s that you can't get even on Spotify, Apple Music still. You gotta find them on vinyl.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of artists, like the rights to their work,
Yeah.
how that gets so conflated.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild.
Especially back in the day. Again, now fantastic musical reference. There's a new documentary out on George Michael called Freedom that he was actually producing about himself
Oh,
up until the day he died. And it's available now on Showtime. I highly recommend, if you're a fan, seek this thing out. It is very, 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 very tragically sad in many ways.
if you have time to watch it and then cry.
But it's also
Man.
unbelievably amazing because I think people forget not only how huge he was as an artist and how influential, but how he just kept really reinventing and doing things. And one of these things was kind of going after the record companies who said, you're this, and he didn't want to be that anymore. And what happened and how Prince followed suit years later. And it's really interesting stuff. All right, we've got a lot of hype, and our Gus bot has spun. And we have chosen, and today's winner is Chris Ivanyi. Chris Ivanyi, I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Chris Ivanyi, you are our winner of posters. Thank you. Yes, Florent. That's a better word choice, I think. All right. Pool party. All right. Very nice.
Cool pool party.
Cool pool party.
So, what we're doing now is let's say we've got our gate done.
Yeah.
We've made our gate. And to go back to what we talked about earlier, maybe you did yours in 3D. Maybe in your project, things should be three-dimensional, right? Maybe the methodology doesn't actually change that much, right? Creating, or at least in my mind, it doesn't change a lot. What we're doing is still going to be very similar. If you're working in a 3D way, it'll change a little bit, just in the way you might organize things, what's in the bin, what's outside the bin, and how you group what things together, how you create scenes. But what's important, I think, conceptually, is whether we're doing it virtually. We're both talking about our love of stop motion animation. If we were trying to accomplish the same idea in stop motion, you kind of have to take a step back from the thing, do some diagrams, figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to accomplish it. And we use very similar techniques. So we've got this gate. It will be our centerpiece. So now when I bring that into a new composition, look who's here to hang out with us. It's some labels.
Yep.
And what I'm doing is I'm just putting on the scale some hold keyframes so that we're going from the gate going one way to, then it's going to make a little switcheroo here when it goes around. So even though before it was just bouncing, now it's flipping.
Right.
Whee! Now we've flipped from one side to the other side. There's another sort of piece that we need in this space. So we've got the gate. What we also need is the hole in the gate. So we've got a new, let's make a new solid real quick. Make it the comp size, and we are going to work with, we have the Utopia colors over here.
That would have been great if we did.
You know what, if I had have loaded that up. Well,
Yeah.
so what
Okay,
I like to do, I don't always use sort of in the libraries, because this is
Right.
fairly new to
Right,
me.
right.
What I always do, or have done for a while, is that I render out like a PNG
Right.
of the color palette, and I just stick that in the footage panel, and then I just pin that over here,
Right.
and then I just kind of access
Legit, it works. That's right.
like it does it. And I'll say this, like, you could use things, there are a bunch of plugins that do this kind of thing and can automatically recolor if I change those things. You're taking up resources with this kind of thing, right? Let's simplify our lives a little bit. So we got this going on. So what I was thinking about was having a new solid. So let's make that. We just, oh, see, we're just going to look over here. We're going to eyedropper. Boop. There we go. This is going to be our sky. The gate, I think the gate needs to be recolored. So we recolor that using, see if the effects window is over here. It isn't. So we will get the window, the effects and presets. It was over there somewhere. Oh, now it's, oh, that's essential graphics. Oh, I don't think there's enough coffee in the system today.
Oh no.
That's what's, here we go. The effects and presets. Oh, and it's over here in this one. Good. Let's just minimize.
Yeah, you got a lot of.
That's the opposite of minimize. The double click was too fast. Here we go. So what we use is usually a tint. And when we apply a tint to a black and white thing, we're basically able to recolor it.
Right.
So in our world, libraries can get small as well. In our world, instead of using a black, we're using a dark blue. Instead of a white, we are using the red. So we end up with this look. So it's looking like that. We would probably like a line that will serve as the ground. Now check this out. Instead of the very nice way that I usually organize things, I'm just drawing a weird
Did
line.
you just eyeball that? That was pretty good.
What can I say? I'm pretty great.
You are pretty awesome. That was great.
Japan.
I could tell you almost every line I put on that way is kind of always skewed. I'm like, I was sure it was a straight line.
Just hold down shift as hard as you can.
That's right.
and
Yes,
you'll get
constrain
there.
that from happening. Right, good point.
That's why I have so many like carpal tunnel
Yes,
problems.
it's too many keyboard shortcuts.
'Cause I'm-
Serves you right.
Because I'm
Show off.
like constantly hovering, just ready to pounce on one of these keys. So yeah, we've got this gate. Now it's flipping. But like I said, the element that's missing is what is through the gate. What's on the other side of the gate? Now, the way I would do that is let's go back into the example gate. Give me the front wall. I'm just gonna copy that. And now we're gonna paste it in here. Oh no, it's not the front wall. Using the power of labels, it's the front of the gate.
Front
So
of the
this
gate,
part
right.
here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna paste that in. Thanks to the way everything is still timed, this is gonna be moving right along with all of the stuff. But the front of the gate isn't what I'm interested in. I'm interested in one of the rectangles, but not the other. So I'd like to get rid of the outside rectangle, like so. Everything else is totally fine. Everything else is great. We probably don't really need the stroke, but it doesn't take up a lot of processing power. Then we just stick it in behind, and I'm going to give it a garish off-brand color.
No.
Not that red, because we
That's
learned
right.
in streaming.
That's right. Streamer red. You don't want that.
That's right. So just a garish color so I know it doesn't belong. And what we can do is we can just use this as like an alpha mat to reveal something else, right?
Okay. That's where you were going with that, I assumed.
Exactly. So instead of calling this example gate 2, let's call this beach 1.
Okay.
So let's say this is where the beach is at. What I would like to be revealed inside of beach 1 is jungle 1. So in jungle 1, things are different, colors are different, life is different. So if we look at the effects controls, it's green lighting instead. If we look at making a new solid down here, it's a green solid that will serve as our background. So that's the world that's happening in jungle 1.
Right.
In beach 1, we see through the gate jungle 1. So it goes here. And then we use a track mat to reveal it. So we would say, well, in jungle 1, why don't you show me, alpha mat of that? Right now, nothing has changed, right? It's still green. Now, the reason is because when we look through that gate, we have this.
Right.
So we will purge those layers, we'll remove them, but before we do, we're going to duplicate it to also make jungle 2, which is the jungle that has a gate in it. Because if you looked through a gate, you wouldn't also see the gate.
Right.
That's silly. That's
Nonsense.
You're getting way too science
That's
fiction-y.
right. Very science fiction.
So what we would have is this, which is not much. But through this, we see that, which is not interesting because there isn't anything moving or interacting back there. So what we need is some stuff. We can put some stuff back there. Now, we don't need to poke these out. We could still look at them, but we could change them to be guide layers. If we change them to be guide layers, which you do by selecting, right-clicking, and saying guide layer, you have these little hashes over here, then they are not rendered. So you see them here, but they're not rendered here, or they're not rendered when you see them elsewhere. And it's super important to sometimes use these to leverage them so that we know we're going to work in this scene. We still need to know where the gate is, still need to know how it's moving. We shouldn't just delete it. We should just, because what we're solving is, we don't want to see it in the other comp, right? So we just won't see it. It's that easy. This is solving that trouble for us. So we should put some plants. It's a jungle. Let's do some plants. So what we're going to do is we're going to make use of a really fun new feature when we make plants. The fun new feature is this path to nulls, null to path thing. So we teased that a little bit. I'm going to show a grid. I'm going to snap to a grid, and we're going to draw out here. We're just going to draw a nice plant. I'm going to draw a fun little plant out here. And we'll say this is going to be like the stem of the plant. Let's say that. And the stem of the plant, we're going to keyframe the path just a little bit so that the path is like waving. So it's going to wave a little bit. It's going to like bend like that. That could be a fine bend. One fun thing that's nice to do is, again, leveraging the idea of guide layers. We would think that point should sort of stay in a circle around. So we could just draw a circle, and we could say that this is our guide circle, and we will turn this into a guide layer like that, so that when we're thinking about the constraint that we're putting onto this at its fullest height, it would be here. Then it should also touch the circle when it bends, right? So maybe it bends at most like this, and that's fairly organic. It starts to come off of the circle a little bit, so just drag it, put it back on the circle. That's all right. What you could do, you maybe want this to be a little bit eased because it's blowing in the wind. But again, don't let it come off of that circle too much. How about over here? How's it doing? Oh, it's coming off a little bit. So just touch it back up, get it back on the circle, and that's good. So this doesn't need a fill to it. That's fine. Doesn't need that. We're going to give it a little bit of a thicker line. And we're going to use the path to put some leaves on it. If, let's say, you wanted to stick some leaves on this thing, how would we have done this before? Well, probably I would have created a vertical thing of the fern, this fern thing, and then deformed it using the puppet. Right? I'd used the puppet tool because I want all the leaves to bend with this thing. But we can use, and I believe we find it using the help function and spelling paths. The menu item here, which is found, create some nulls from paths. It's going to pop up this big time window, which is fun. Where shall it live? It'll go up here a little bit. It creates this window that gives you some options. You can have points follow nulls, meaning this will create some nulls, and the points will always go where the null is, and the null is the captain. Or the nulls can follow the points, which means we will end up with a null for this point, a null for that. But I'm going to use the third option, the trace path. The trace path is creating a null that goes along the path and constantly does that. That's its life. It just likes to do that. Now, I like using this function is fun because I can turn this keyframe off for the progress, and I can say where on the path I would like it to be. So I can just manually say, be at the halfway point. So I can make that happen. Some things I love about this are, notice the rotation is matching the tangent of the line, right? How fun is that? So that if I make a leaf, and maybe the leaf will just be a circle, maybe it won't even be a super interesting kind of leaf, and we'll just fill the leaf with a little gradient, or maybe it'll just be a fill. Let's keep it easy here. So yeah, I'm clicking on the exact same thing. I'm just saying in my brain, don't click on that thing again. So we've got this thing. We're going to offset it from its anchor point just a little bit, out like so. So this is a 100 by 100 thing, and it's going out, minus 75. So the anchor point is outside its shape. We could parent it to this thing here. Let me just rotate it by 90 degrees so it's off to the side. And because it's following the tangent, it's like it's coming off a stem, and it's just hanging out, it's staying there, it's having a great time. So what I also want to do, so the way I made the ferns in the example that you can find is that I kind of just linked the scale using an expression, linked it to the path progress. So depending on how far the progress is, so if it was up here, it'll be bigger. If it's down here, it'll be smaller. You end up with that kind of scenario. And then it's just a matter of duplicating the pair. Boop. So then you got a couple of these. Go in here. Now it's going up here. Something that you have to be aware of, though, is that linkage between leaf 2, it's still referencing the earlier thing, right? So if you want to make this truly procedural, it's not this comp layer and then a name. It's this comp layer and then index -1, I think. Or it would be index +1 in this case, so that it is always referencing the null right under it. And as long as we keep this pattern, it'll be totally cool with that. So now I can just whoop up there, and now that's a leaf. Now I can duplicate this again and give me an error. I just move it. Now the error has been resolved because the pattern has been reestablished. So now I whoop, just like that. And now let's make another leaf, duplicate, put up here, and then we go again. Fun sound effects. I'm gonna be whoop, all the way up to the top. You want to be careful though when you reach 100%. When you reach 100% on the trace path, it gets a little bit wacky sometimes. Notice it's kind of vibrating. And that is because at the 100% at the apex, the tangent it's trying to calculate doesn't have further along on the path to reference, so it's really shaky. Sometimes if you're sort of constraining it, like if you're telling the other side of the handle where to look, then there's data there because the Bezier is kind of, it's still got the data. But what you can really just do is just back that off, just slack it off by 0.1%.
Right, and then you don't run into that problem.
That's right.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Now it's perfect.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah, and that's
and visually that's not going to change. No one's going to.
I don't think people will notice.
Maybe. Yeah.
You know, what if they do? Good for them.
That's
You solved my leaf puzzle.
You win.
That's right. You win critiques. So yeah, we end up with this kind of leaf structure, and it's bending with the tangent of the line, which is a lot of fun for me, because if I were to do this with the puppet path instead, we wouldn't end up with these nice the gaps, like the spine of this thing wouldn't splay and open up in this nice way.
Right.
So it's just really nice to have that ability. And we're doing leaves along a stem here. This is the same way you might put an elbow along an arm,
Right.
or multiple elbows along a multi-armed alien, right? Or maybe it's joints on a robot, or maybe it could be anything. So, but this is freeing us up to sort of be able to do things just a little bit quicker, a little bit more responsively, and more accurately is the other sort of thing that this is opening up for us.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just make sure that we have this thing looking nice. We've got one half of a tree done, so we would just duplicate everything, put them up like so, and then we would take all of these other leaves and we would layer, transform, flip them horizontally. No, wait, that wouldn't make any sense because we used a rotation. So we'll just rotate them around to the other side, so it would be not positive 90, but negative 90. And then we end up with this thing that bunches the vertebrae on one side and expands it on the other.
Right.
So it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's got that alien plant-like stuff
Right.
going down. And all of it is driven by one set of keyframes. And that's pretty important for people who want to remain sane and be able to edit this stuff. Because if you come back later and you're like, yeah, I don't really dig that, or man, I really wish that this lasted for more seconds, right? You can definitely do that. You can have this thing just wave in the wind very nicely. So this animation runs from 0 to 3 seconds, which is nice. So let's stick the plants into the jungle. So we're going to take the plants, put them in the jungle, and, you know, they could go, where are they going to live? This happy little plant is going to live over here. I'm going to use a ramp, the hardware accelerated ramp.
That's right.
We can call back to the hardware acceleration of the ramp for a moment. And we're going to just apply the ramp. Notice how the ramp is, these ramp things are stuck on the layer. So if I move the layer around, they're stuck on the layer. How fun is that? Where before, perhaps not the case, because I do remember having to clamp those down.
That's right.
Very unpleasant. So we've got a fern wagging around. Where should the fern live? Let's say it lives right next to the gate, right over here, and it needs to move also. It shouldn't hang out right there, because now the gate is twisting, and the universe is remaining static. So what we need is sort of a null object, and this null object can stand in for back of gate, or maybe we call it background elements, so that we can kind of keep organized that we may put many things by the back of the gate. So we just kind of position it at the back of the gate where we'd like it to be, and then we just go into its position here, and we know that it's going to stay stuck back by the back of the gate. So it's should always be at that back corner. So you need to make sure that its graph looks similar to the graph that governs the twisting of the gate. And that means that this point is correct, but these points are not as correct. They need to be pushed. We end up with this kind of deal. So pretty close, except in the middle here where things are not so good, but we can alleviate that by just dropping a keyframe down. And if we look at the graph editor and we just use, just like that, now it's the exact same graph.
Right.
Perfectly exact graph. So it'll always seem like it's stuck in the back corner. And now we just simply parent our plant to the background elements thing, and now it's bending and waving and it's moving. So now that's going down. And because we've added a plant in here, if we went back to the beach,
Right.
look
at that.
The little plant is waiting for you on the
That's
other side of the
right.
portal. You want to go through the portal into the jungle? It's right there. So
That's so cool.
what I would say is, if you're working this way, you get to surprise yourself with fun reveals, but the methodology is pretty much the same. Whether you have used 3-dimensional stuff or 2-dimensional stuff, you're still going to be needing to have a gate that sort of covers up a hole you're making in space and time, through which you will view another composition.
Right.
So even if they're both sort of the same thing, you might do 2 renders of 3D things.
Right.
You might be having 2 filmings of real things. As long as you have a matched shot, which we can do inside of After Effects a lot easier, because it's all virtual stuff, it's all keyframes. If you're using motion control rigs, it's the same concept, that you're replicating 2 things, putting them over top of each other, cutting a hole in one through which you view the other one.
Right.
So we could continue adding elements, adding even more elements. The one thing you have to be aware of, though, is that Jungle 1, the comp we've named Jungle 1, is only about the things that you're going to see through the gate. If we were to put elements in front of the gate over here, that wouldn't make too much sense, because given the angle we're looking through, if a plant lives right here on the front, we wouldn't see that through the gate, right? Because looking through the gate, you'd only see the objects behind the gate. So that's a little bit of internal consistency to sort of be aware of, that you would only want the behind elements to be doing that. So that's some internal consistency to think about.
Sure.
Now, you need to go through the gate and back again. So the back again portion is going to require us to take our beaches, take our jungles, and to move them into yet another composition.
Yet another new comp.
Yeah, so we would take beach 1, move it into a new composition, and this might be, I don't know, what is it? Through the Woods and Back Again, with a tale by Bilbo Baggins. Back Again. So you can name these things whatever you want, big long sentences. I don't recommend doing that, but we know that the cut will happen here. That's the cut where we stop seeing one and we start seeing the other. So we can put a little nip there, and we're going to use Jungle 2, which is what we'll take over. So, and Jungle 2 will be looking at Beach 1. Right. I know it's tough to, with all these things that we're throwing around, Beach 1, Beach 2, which is the thing? So when we look at Beach 1, we see through the gate again.
Right.
So we need a Beach 2.
That's right.
We need 2 beaches. 2 beaches, 2 jungles. Now, it seems like overkill, seems like a lot of stuff, but having all of these parts allows us to go through things and prevent loops from happening.
Right.
Because using some methods, you can end up with a loop in which you have a layer inside a layer referenced by that layer that's inside it, and that is logically inconsistent, so you can't do that. And I mean, thankfully the program just doesn't allow it.
It doesn't let you do that.
So you don't have that happen.
Unfortunately, you can do that in an audio mixer, or it's very dark in Premiere and Audition if you make that looping mistake.
Yeah, so in Beach 2, we just purged that stuff out, and now the redness of Beachland, which in our example had like a sun in it, but now we're doing that cut from this to this. Right? So making that cut, we want to cover up this time.
Right.
And the easiest way to sort of do that is to take elements that are common or could live in both.
Right, and time remap.
And, well, first we cover, and then we can time remap.
Okay, yeah.
So when we take our plants, we drop our plants out here. The plants are now going to be very, very big because they are very, very close to us. And we would create like a little forest in front of us here so that we can kind of cover that up. Now you notice when I scaled it up, got a little crispy around the edges, so you can just collapse transformations to not deal with that particular problem. But we kind of want to create a profusion, a density of plants here, so that we can just see little cracks through it, and we want it to be out of frame at the start and end. So it's just kind of brushing past us.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when we do a match cut like this in film, you would be using like a door or a column or a person who walks by. It's the exact same idea. It is a covered match cut. or whatever term you use at your office.
That's right.
People have different terms for different things. So, again, we are matching the movement of things, which we know starts at 1 second. So that's when the moving kind of starts happening. So we've created a null, and the null will eventually end up in the middle, but it's going to be here at one moment. It's going to be over here at another. In the middle, it's going to be in the middle. We know these things. And so this is going to be far over here in this space, perhaps. And then over here, it'll be equally far. So it could be helpful to just add another null object, have one parented to the other, so that we know that this is going, say, 900 pixels over there, and then it will go negative 900 on that side. And we just parent our plants, our cover plants, to that. And we're going to ease these things. So in the graph, they're going to need to look, again, we're making the exact same shape. Same shape, same shape. So now, just like that. And so this is that stop in the middle that we experience much harder now because there's a lot more happening. So we really feel like, oh, we've stopped on this, which is not good. But again, we can massage that out if we time remap this whole business and just edit that out if we'd like. Or perhaps in your world, you simply have the two graphs kind of go together. Something else we can do is, because this is the cover, rather than have it be a linear hard stop, what we want to do is have this have continuous, locking the incoming and outgoing, and so it.
Oh. Wow, that's almost like a flash transition, like a, now you really don't see it because of the motion involved.
Because the thing that's closest to us, that's covering the problem, is making it go away.
That's right.
So our eye is kind of caught by this. We don't even notice the pause that the background is doing.
No, not at all.
I mean, the other thing is we've got it, I think, moving in the opposite direction to what we want. So we want to just time reverse those. There we go. But whoop, that's pretty much it. So the other thing we need to do is have more of these plants. So you should have more and different and just a variety.
Sized and differently sized.
Exactly. Flip them around, make more, make things that are larger or closer to you, for example. Really just fill it up with junk. Just like flip them around. I think in the example we use a couple different kinds of plants. But you should really only need like 3 kinds of the plants to make it seem...
Create the illusion.
Yeah, a credible jungle of plants.
By the way, while you're doing that, Peter was asking if you have any tips on organizing your pre-comps in a good way.
Yeah, so it really depends on sort of when we talk about organization, is the idea to organize them sort of conceptually, which is going to be heavily dependent on the project and what you're actually trying to accomplish, or is it about organizing them for reference? That's another sort of thing to consider when you're putting this kind of deal together. But the big thing I find is labeling, so that you know logically where things go. So if you're creating pre-comps that belong to, like, these belong to scene 5, call it S5 phone, right? And as long as it's a nomenclature that you'll understand.
And remember.
Yeah. Also, you can have folders. You can have infinite folders. So it's good to kind of stick things into things, put them where they belong.
Stick things into things.
Well, the idea is that, you don't want stuff just hanging out in one big place. That can be real confusing for folks, and confusing for yourself. And if you have a whole bunch of things that are called Comp 1, Comp 7, Comp 11, what does that even mean to you 2 days in? You're like, I don't remember which comp we're on. So in that way, you really want to... when you're organizing, is to label. Now, when you're making the choice of what layers will I cram into one pre-composition, that's a project-based problem that is down to what you're solving when you do the pre-composition.
Okay.
So if it's a discrete object, Some people, for example, if you're making a person, like a character, you might pre-compose the entire face, and then in that pre-composition, you could have little, just like we did, we have little labels for each of the like facial expressions. So instead of gate open, gate close, gate open again, you could have smile to frown. You could
Right.
have people's eyebrow to, I was going to say, let's say resting bee face.
Yeah.
So you could have all of these.
Or and you know, furrowed brow to
Yeah.
excited brow or something.
Yeah,
Whatever.
you could have all of these things, and if that's your method, that would be totally good, because then on that composition you have the ability to time remap and go between those phases. So that makes perfect sense to the way that project would be organized. However, if the expression won't be changed and used a lot, maybe you have all the facial elements on this in the same composition as all the other elements of the person. And if it's not the sort of thing that's going to be, you're going to go back to it and you're going to mess with stuff and they're going to have a narrative context. If you're just making a GIF, and it's just going through this thing, you might have 200 layers in one composition.
Right.
I've seen people who do amazing work and that's what it looks like. So you don't need to necessarily be nesting things. To say there is, no one best way is kind of a cop-out, but the thing is, if it works for you, and if it works for, everyone who's going to have to touch that thing,
Right.
then that is the solution. There is no, you've got 10 layers, time to pre-compose.
That's right. Right.
Because pre-composing also really affects how effects work.
Right. Absolutely.
So for us, we've pre-composed the gate, and we've done that so that I can recolor it later.
Right.
So that I can, we can do stuff like having it recolored if we want, or we could apply all kinds of effects to it if we wanted to make this like a grainy gradient and that kind of thing.
And then there's other considerations too, especially in After Effects and Premiere when you're introducing video with pre-composed things where you're using like time remapping and or warp stabilization.
Yes.
And there's certain things that have to be done in a particular order to make that
things
stuff
that will
work.
be in conflict, or things that need to be done in certain order. So yeah, you would. I mean, for me, I do a fair amount of VFX work as well. Right. That you need to solve the camera incredibly accurately,
right.
Layer your stuff. So even if it's a really shaky camera, you still want to be accurate to that, and then warp stabilize it, because the warp stabilizing, if you warp stabilize first and then you try to solve that, it's gonna be a little bit difficult because you are adding a little bend and stuff into it.
Right.
And what I like to do is work with the footage as shaky as it is, get a stable track on it. Sometimes I even use Mocha to really lock it down.
Yep.
So we've got a stable track on it, and then we input all of our 3D elements in there. Then we stabilize that situation. So the warp is being applied to all of the unreal elements I've put in the scene.
Right.
And what you get is the idea that, yeah, you did film a scene in which there were a bunch of pop-ups around this apartment, right? So that works to harmonize the thing, because all the distortions are being applied to the effects that I've put in there.
Right.
And
very cool.
Sometimes I don't stabilize it.
That's right.
Keep it real.
And because the shakiness is what tells us.
Is what tells us, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
All right, so we've got about 1 minute until we have to start reviewing some submissions.
Okay.
I'm pulling them up right now.
Right, because we've hit the deadline for submission.
Yeah, that deadline is over, so some are still coming in. What we've got is what we've got.
Look, it is what it is. Something we've heard.
You'll get nothing and like it.
It is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. That's some Socrates 101
That's
stuff.
another one right there.
The thing
That's
is
right.
itself.
That's right.
So yeah, and we're going to review those. We're going to see which we like best. Okay. Give some stuff away.
A couple more seconds, waiting for a couple to load in here for YouTube, for the YouTubes to process them.
And so yeah, something I'll say is that if you came in late to the stream, if you're just joining us, if you missed the other 2 days, all that content is available at the Adobe YouTube spot. If you enjoy listening to the sound of my voice, you could go to the EC Abrams YouTube channel, available at EC Abrams on YouTube. If you have questions that we didn't get to, just tweet at me and I'll get back at you. So at EC Abrams on the Twitter. So you could tweet questions there if you feel you want to want to prolong this interaction, you can definitely do that. I haven't finished it, but I'll send it anyway. This is that's how we do this kind of gate thing. There were so many. This is the floating butt that we did earlier.
Shauna X approved, I think.
Oh yeah, she was.
She did. She and Robzilla collaborated on one of the covers for one of my singles on Spotify called "Retouch Me," and in there, and if you watch Shauna too, she's like, "So what do you want in this? Like, what do you like?" And I said, well, you know. And she goes, "No, let me." And she's like, "Pizza, butts." I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, sure, you know."
Yeah, pizza butts. Give me that.
And there's these two legs. This is a butt and leg sticking out in my hair in this drawing. It's phenomenal. And
Beautiful.
Kind of reminds me of that. Very good.
Look, the human body is a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
We're not here to shame anybody's strange bean legs.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yes, and I see. Yes, Laura. Okay, you've got a link change because I was trying to get yours to load. I have it now. Hold on, I've got your new link. All right, so this should hopefully do it. All right, so we don't have that many submissions. I'm a little disappointed.
Guys, come on.
Okay.
You can win a year's subscription to the most powerful and excellent suite of tools.
All right. It's still 20 seconds. Okay. All right. All right, well, Laura. Well, I'll keep yours at the end for the moment. Hold on. We just got a few more coming in here.
Once you scare people, then they start
That's
coming
right.
in. Yeah. But yeah, I would definitely recommend people to go back, listen to and view the earlier days stuff, play around with stuff, and even though you can't win things, share your work on Behance with each other, with the community. Behance is a place that I kind of trawl through, looking for kind of inspiration on things. So it's a great place to not only see see inspirational stuff, but a lot of people also they share their process behind it, which is pretty great. So you can see the iterations, you can see where it started. I think a lot of the time we see a final project, like a final product, and we think, oh, that's amazing. How could it possibly have been done? And then you look back and you see all of the crap that ended up in the garbage. You're like, yeah, I can see why this is so good, because they made and iterated and a lot was thrown away is chipped away from the marble to reveal the beautiful statue under it. So that's how it goes down sometimes.
Okay, all right. This is coming in.
It's coming together.
It's coming together. Okay, all right. So we've got 5 submissions. So let's reveal the 5.
Good.
And then I think we'll do a final play on this. You'll pick the winner, and then we're gonna send love. Send some love. All right. Okay, so here's the first one. Juan Camilo Ramirez. I can't. Sometimes mouth doesn't work as fast as my brain.
Well, this is the 3rd day, so
it is. Juan Camilo Ramirez. Here we go. Energy station motion. As the YouTubes tries to load. Here we go. Okay.
Utopia. Take him to spaceship.
Oh, nice.
That's a nice drawing.
Yeah.
Trying to see what is that spinning around on his ship.
Yeah.
Oh, it's taking the battery away.
All right.
It's fun. Yeah, we got some loops. A lot of loops going on.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on in there. Very nice.
And we talked a little bit about the idea of overlapping motion.
Right.
We see with this rocket, though, we do see a lot of that thing where it begins rotating and moving at the same time.
Right.
If you just offset those a little bit, that can really make it feel more floaty, more organic. When you're in a 0G environment, that's what you would end up with, right? You would end up with like a strong kick and then constant, and your inertia would never go away.
Right.
So for a spaceship, you would really want to emphasize that drift, right?
Right.
Or it's firing retro rockets, and so its movement would be
right.
All right, so here's Dana Pride.
Oh, the Temple of Infinite Cats.
That's right, the Temple of Infinite Kittens. Very nice.
Oh yeah, because we got things that are behind pillars,
That's
things that are in
right,
front
yeah,
of pillars.
yeah.
So we got, it's two-dimensional, but it is showing depth.
Depth and perspective there.
Yeah.
Very nice.
One of those nice unrealities.
Okay, so this one, this is actually Javier Oliver. Utopia Boss.
That's a nice loop.
Yeah.
That's a nice starts. Yeah, and the transformation is also like we go from squares to circles.
Right.
Yeah,
And some similar maybe style techniques that you were just showing there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the gradient on the big thing in the middle. I like how that white that white circle kind of shows us a highlight that drifts by, like a lens flare a little bit.
This one also, you really feel the color palette in this one.
Yeah.
It's like, it's minimal, but at the same time, it's very sort of nice.
Yeah, using
complemented together.
using colors sparingly but
Right.
purposefully
Right.
is pretty good. And it's nice that, like, for me, sometimes I like to assault people with color, just to like really punch the audience in the face. But it is good to be disciplined in your color use.
Right, totally. All right, this one is Peter Midvet. Take a look at this. Oh. A little party out
People
there.
are having a party in the hallway, and we were not invited. Some rockets. So this is a fun. I'm not sure if it fully loops, but if the video were to loop, like you can see, we're making use of a technique we kind of talked about yesterday.
Right.
We can see, that the ship is going up and down while it's rotating up
Right.
and down.
I like you see the shadow is changing underneath it as well.
telling us that the land it's going over is curved and warped in some way. Yeah, that's pretty fun.
Okay, all right. And lastly here we have Laura Triana. Let's go ahead and play this one.
Ooh, choose your house style. Boop. Boop. Yeah, so some people interpret briefs very differently. So this is using a lot of photos in a fun way. I think we've got, sort of people.
Oh, and very nice. Chosen Adobe stock images. Very
Yeah, we
good.
didn't talk about Adobe Stock a lot today, but yesterday we used it a lot to sort of help us with the proportion of the silhouettes that we were drawing.
Right.
Using it to help us out on the first day with layout considerations and prototyping. Prototyping is not something you often use the word prototyping. Usually would say you're making a mood board or a storyboard, but it's all the same concept of helping us create an earlier version that we can get approval and feedback on quicker so that our later decisions are made more informed by opinions of all the stakeholders.
Right.
Get your directors on board, your producers on board, get your end client to sign off, and then move forward with the confidence of knowing you're in the right direction and you're not going to get huge changes. So,
All right, so final review here. So we've
Okay.
got Juan Ramirez, Energy Station Utopia.
yeah,
All right.
a lot of things drawn in
A lot
that
of
one.
things drawn in that one. Very nice. Dana Pride, The Temple of Infinite Kittens. And I prevented myself from saying it all 3 days, and there is something about the way she did the logo there that reminds me of Todd Rundgren's Utopia, the band from the late 70s that no one in the chat all week has made any comment about.
Come on, guys.
Surely someone was like, "You mean Todd Rundgren's Utopia?" That was the first thing I said to you.
Yeah.
Nope. No one cares.
No.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Dana.
Now, were they also inspired by Thomas Moore's Utopia?
I think loosely, yes. Yes.
They have
yes,
a lot
were.
of songs, albums dedicated like the chapters.
Not
of the
quite Zeppelin in the Tolkien sense, but
Okay.
a little loosely referenced, I think. Album cover design, kind of actually.
Right.
It kind of takes on that theme, and it's funny. There's an album that I'm thinking of that uses a very similar color palette. I have to just pull this up before we end the stream. So here we have Javier Oliver here. All right, Utopia Boss.
Very good.
Very nice transitions there. Peter Midvet with the rocket ship.
someone's enjoying Atomic Kitten as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, looks like rocket races or hopefully races.
Laura said you're an 80s fan mostly. Yeah, that's Utopia is a very probably not going to hear that reference ever again in your life. It's, Yes, the band. Yeah, Chris Walkman's going, oh, the band. Right, yeah.
The band?
Right.
There's a band?
All right. Okay.
Cool. So
and that was Laura. So those are our 5.
Cool. So yeah, considering like everything we're seeing, like when we look at the Utopia boss one, I think that's the one that really stands out for me. It's got all the principles in there, really leveraging the color palette. It's kind of an interesting thing that loops very nicely, and the framing is nice on it. Like, just the composition of the framing is consistent and considered, and each frame is pleasing to observe. So I think there's a lot of attention going on in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I dig it. I'd give it to that one.
All right. You heard it. From Evan's mouth, from the horse's mouth, but I hate using those kinds of...
Nay.
Nay. Here till Thursday.
Yeah.
Try the shrimp.
Yeah.
All right, so... Our winner, Utopia Boss.
Yeah.
All right, very nice. Nicely done. Okay, so in our final 3 minutes before we can go to the 2-shot, man. Before we go, let us know if you've got any questions, any last minute, any things that you'd like to ask. And yes, again, thank you, Tim. Yes, congratulations, Javier Oliver. Very nicely done. Congrats to everyone who submitted. Thank you so much for all your work. It's been awesome actually seeing all this work come together this week.
Among multiple disciplines, like
right?
A lot of really. I think what's great is that if you stick around for the whole day's events, like you're getting a lot of cross-stream ideas. So,
Totally.
And for me, like a lot of the work I do is for a video export, but very recently I've started getting into doing animations that show up in apps. So having that UX knowledge informs. When I was talking about cross-training before, like, having that knowledge empowers you to work in different ways. And a lot of people, they say, well, I'm a motion designer. How do I drum up clients? I'm stuck in this kind of niche area. Like, you don't have to be stuck in one lane. There are so many ways you can go with the ability to make things move in pleasing ways. So there's a lot of areas that you can apply yourself and don't pigeonhole yourself in those ways. Yeah. So
And those things are really, it's all sort of merging closer together now anyway, right?
When we reach the singularity of the single creative app.
That's right. It does everything. Yeah. And we get asked that all the time, right? I know, again, just having done this stream a few weeks ago on motion graphics templates, like, why don't you just put After Effects in Premiere already? And immediately the chat just went, with all the After Effects, mostly After Effects users going, no, and all the reasons why not, and then, and...
Well, it's, like we talk about the Creative Suite, and I talk about it like a garage full of tools. Right?
As you said yesterday,
and
totally,
you could have a Swiss Army knife. If you ever tried to actually do real work with a Swiss Army knife, you're breaking it.
That's right.
If you think about all the effort, the programming, the engineering that goes into this stuff, like there are teams and teams of experts. If you were to demand that, you have one thing that works for everybody, that's a big ask. That's so much of a big ask. If it's compartmentalized, it's easier to make that work, just from a practical standpoint. I think a lot of the times the consumers of the tool don't recognize.
Right. I would imagine so. Well, I got to tell you, Evan, man, it has been awesome having you here this week. Thank you so much for gracing the Adobe Live studio once again.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a luxury.
Yeah.
And, anytime you need me, you call and I'll be there.
We're so grateful, and we're grateful to all of you for watching and tuning in. Now, you're going to want to stick around because Kathleen and Christine are coming back for the last 2 hours of this week's Life in the Agency here at b.net/live. Again, if you're watching on Behance or on YouTube, thank you so much. They'll be on in approximately 5 minutes or so stick around. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.